19 curious facts about everything in the world that will broaden your horizons. China is the least religious country on Earth. A 2015 Gallup poll showed that 90% of its residents are either convinced atheists or are not religious. In 2017, a funny incident occurred in the American city of Santa Clara. Thieves stole GPS trackers from the Romby Corporation. Naturally, it was not difficult for this large IT company to track the location of their devices and report it to the police. Just a few hours later, the criminals were caught. According to some data, malaria has claimed the lives of about 50 billion people throughout the existence of mankind. This is despite the fact that, as demographers have calculated, about 100 billion people have been born throughout the existence of our planet. In 1896, U.S. psychologist George Stratton created an invertoscope, glasses that turned the image upside down before light entered the eye. At first, Stratton was very disoriented, but after 3 days, he had formed new visual motor associations. And with each passing day, he was less and less aware that the world was upside down. When the scientist took off his glasses, his perception of the world was disrupted again. However, this time, adaptation to normal vision was much faster. The term Bluetooth is an English adaptation of the word broaden, which means Bluetoothed in Danish. This was the nickname of the Viking king Harald I Bluetooth, who lived in Denmark in the 10th century. This king had a dark front tooth, for which he was nicknamed. And Harald I's merit is that he was able to unite the warring Danish tribes into a single kingdom. Bluetooth is supposed to do the same with communication protocols, combining them into one universal standard. Incidentally, the Bluetooth logo is a combination of two Scandinavian runes, Hagalaz of the younger Futhark, and Berkana, the sound values of which correspond to the initials of Harald I Bluetooth, H and B. The current Emperor of Japan, Emperor Akihito, plans to step down in April 2019 and pass the throne to his heir. This will be the first voluntary abdication of an emperor in the history of the land of the rising sun in 200 years. Silicon field effect transistors are the most mass-produced technical product in the history of mankind. For example, in 2003 alone, so many transistors were produced that there would be about 100 million units for every person living on Earth. Canada has more than 2 million large and small lakes, which contain about 20% of the world's fresh water. There are so many lakes that there is no exact data on their number. When Ashton Kutcher was 13 years old, he almost committed suicide by jumping from a hospital balcony. His twin brother Michael was in the hospital waiting for a donor heart, and the chances of an operation were getting smaller every day. According to Ashton, the condition of his brother, who suffered from cardiomyopathy, was very depressing for him. And in the end, he decided to jump from the balcony so that his heart would go to his brother. But at the last moment, his father stopped him. It turned out that the heart for transplant was already on the way. By the way, in the photo above is the famous actor with his brother Michael. An analysis of the history of almost 200 countries in the world showed that there are only 22 countries in the world that were not invaded by the British at different times. Here, by the way, are the countries that were not invaded by the British: Andorra, Belarus, Bolivia, Burundi, Central African Republic, Chad, Congo, Guatemala, Ivory Coast, Kyrgyzstan, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Mali, Marshall Islands, Monaco, Mongolia, Paraguay, São Tomé and Príncipe, Sweden, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Vatican. A guy named Andy George decided to personally produce all the ingredients for a regular sandwich. To do this, he grew wheat and vegetables himself, extracted salt from sea water, milked a cow, made cheese and butter, ground flour, collected honey. He even had to kill a chicken himself. In the end, it took him 6 months and $1,500 to make all the ingredients for the sandwich from scratch. In 1999, a group of scientists led by Lena Westergaard Howe managed to reduce the speed of light to 17 meters per second, and then, 2 years later, the same group of researchers completely stopped light, albeit for only a few fractions of a second. Let's remember that the speed of light is almost 300 million meters per second. Researchers have found that bats can address each other individually and often argue. When someone you love rejects you, your brain reacts in the same way as it does to physical pain. On November 27, 1990, Muhammad Ali held a personal meeting with Saddam Hussein, and the topic of negotiations was the release of American hostages in Iraq and Kuwait. A few days later, the boxer escorted 15 freed prisoners from Iraq, which only added to his respect around the world.